All right, hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Juan Soto. I was the CEO of StrongLoop until it was acquired by IBM. I guess technically I'm still the CEO of StrongLoop. But my new role at IBM now is going to be the Vice President of Interaction Services. And what that is a layer, if you will, a new layer that we see in the enterprise architecture that allows companies to connect all of their devices, basically everything that you might connect an API to all of their back-end systems. And so today, I have the privilege of hosting this panel. This panel is intended to be interactive. I do have plenty of questions to cover the time that we have. It is a double session, so we may see a couple of folks come in and out with some overlapping sessions. But really, it's intended to be a chance for you to ask questions of the esteemed panel here. I'll introduce them in a second, and then they'll introduce themselves in more detail. But a lot of what they have to offer you is real-world experience of deploying Node in an enterprise, and what's worked, what's not, what they wish was different. And to be fair, a lot of this is in the context of Node for API use cases, so I'll ask a bunch of questions about that as well. So, make sense? You're all ready to ask questions throughout and interact, so it's not just us reaching out to you? Somebody nod their head yes for that too? Okay, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists today. So first up at the end is Joe Rice of Bank of America, and his title is API Integration Architect. To his left is Shelby Sanders of GoDaddy. GoDaddy is Shelby is the principal architect for platforms at GoDaddy. And immediately to my right is Bryan Rogers, who's a development manager for services integration at TD Bank. Again, these are all folks that have real-world experience using Node. So let's just start with you, Joe, first, if you can talk a little bit about what you actually do at the bank and a little bit about your experience with Node.
Sure. So I've been with Bank of America 12 years now, focusing on enterprise integration. And what does that really mean? If you think of I can relate it back to some of the sessions here, right? We saw in earlier sessions Intel and Microsoft and to some extent IBM talking about this ubiquitous Internet of Things, right? Well, Bank of America has its own mini Internet of Things, right? We have 60,000 servers, 6,000 reusable services, 5,000 branches, 16,000 ATMs. So we have this huge mesh of channels of customers interfacing with domains, systems of record throughout the bank. And because of serial acquisitions, we've acquired kind of the Noah's Ark of technology, right? Two of everything ever made and known to man. Every technology, every protocol, every format, every interface, every platform, every operating system almost that's out there. And now how do we integrate all of that? How do we create a seamless interaction for our customer that's omni-channel? It doesn't care whether they call in on the phone via the IVR or whether they visit a branch or whether whether one of our 50 million customers comes in and uses a mobile phone or a desktop. And so my job has been to help the consumer bank interconnect. So we have this portfolio of 700 reusable web services. We need to register those. Many of them are SOAP-based services, which is a little bit different than the rest of this panel. My focus is more on API kind of in the generic sense, not just a REST API per se, but an interface to a reusable service. And how can we make that easy to access, secure, and nimble, not just in one network zone, but across multiple network zones. We're increasingly outsourcing to trusted vendors and partners. We're increasingly moving our technology from legacy technology like the mainframe onto a private cloud, internal virtualized environments, and how can we take this huge legacy of environments and then begin to look to the future for a target state. So my job has been to build out integration systems. We've been a huge data power shop for a number of years, but as we move to a private cloud, we're looking for more cloud-based technology, open source, trying to lower costs, trying to increase agility. So our development teams are shifting, at least in this portfolio of integration, away from the waterfall process towards agile, trying to have 2-week sprints and develop innovation, develop the ability to onboard and integrate across this vast diversity of technologies and standards. And so what we've built is what I call an integration portal. We've taken a StrongLoop, which is a backend as a service component using Loopback.io, a Node.js component, and we've created a gateway out of Node and a Node service layer for business logic, and what I call a data access layer using the Loopback technology to store data in SQL and NoSQL data stores that's the design time portion of APIs. It's where I can go and suck in data from any registry. We have WebSphere Service Registry and Repository. We have some open source registries from various different companies like WSO2 in the bank. We have people using spreadsheets and other methods still to manage metadata, and we can pull in from a variety of metadata management sources and then apply runtime parameters to it. Things like throttling and logging and transformation and routing, decision points on how to manage that all in this design time registry built out of Node.js. And then I can use an API written using the Swagger interface to enable that to be pulled into any common language runtime on .NET side or JVM on Java side, or Node as a gateway itself to enforce policy and allow end-to-end integration. And so we've taken an AngularJS website where I can drag and drop components. I can drag and drop a load balancer and implement policies there for integration. Drag and drop a gateway, access an API gateway in multiple different technologies. And we've compared things like MuleSoft and WSO2, Camel, and Node.js itself. And so helping our customers through the various different domains of the bank be able to seamlessly integrate on their technology of choice, but be able to manage it in a holistic way from an API perspective is what I've been doing.
Terrific. Shelby, you want to talk about GoDaddy and what you do and a little bit of Node, just a little bit, because I want to have lots of questions later.
Sure. So first things first, how many of you are GoDaddy customers? Just real quick. Right on. Okay. So for those of you that don't know GoDaddy, we focus on everything to take small businesses online. So starting and growing small businesses, that is our bag, right? We're a portfolio of products for everything that you might want to do as a small business to have a strong digital identity. So my focus over the past, I think, like year and a half now, is everything to do with APIs in GoDaddy, both internal and external. And that goes all the way from defining an API design standard that says this is what GoDaddy's flavor of REST looks like. That's kind of our REST religion, if you will, through to a process for doing API spec reviews, so that pretty much everything that is defining a new REST API in GoDaddy goes through that review process, and that's just kind of, that's what we use as the straw man to have the conversation of what a contract should look like. And then on the tail end of that, running a team that's actually implementing a bunch of the APIs, starting out with for our resellers, but then expanding into now everything that's even running our front of site. So that if you're interacting with the site on GoDaddy, you're probably using one of my APIs, and our partners would be using the same thing. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is make it so that we can do all the things to like purchase our products and administrate them that you would do via the web browser, you should be able to do via REST instead. So that's kind of what my life's been like for the last year and a half.
Great. Bryan?
So I've been with TD Bank for 10 years now, and for those of you that don't know, TD Bank, we're based out of Toronto, Canada, and through acquisitions, we're now spread across the east coast of the US. So I'm based in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which is right outside of Philadelphia, and I'm the development manager, the US development manager for the integration team. I also have a large team in Pune, India as well. So we're new to Node, so we're working through a significant app simplification project where we're working through migrating 50+ SOAP-based web services to REST APIs using Node. And what's interesting is we actually deployed our first REST API with Node last night. So it was a big, big milestone for us. And we got no calls, so knock on wood. So it's been an interesting road. My perspective may be a little bit different since we're new, so we're kind of going through all the growing pains now, but so far so good.
So one of the things that we talked about in preparing for the panel today, and it's a decision that some of you might still be in, is as you're bringing a new technology into your company, in particular Node, I know we're all pro Node, that's why we're here, but maybe the adoption is early at your company. And so what are some of the decision factors that you had to consider to be able to bring Node into your company? Each of you is at a very different state. So talk a little bit about that, and in particular, the role of the community. What role did the Node community, and now with the Node Foundation announcements, what did that play in your choice to use Node? So why don't we start with you this time, Shelby?
Okay. So we kind of came at it a bit differently because we're not planning on having one kind of language and framework by any means. So we came at it more from like a describing API standpoint, and so made the commitment more to Swagger first, to define a clean contract between teams and to our partners. And then based on that, It's kind of the natural prototyping environment. So part of it was that we definitely wanted to be able to run stuff up fast. We need to be able to do a lot of mediation and aggregation. You mentioned that maybe you're a little different because you're doing a lot of SOAP. Actually, we have a chunk of SOAP. We have a bunch of SOAP, a bunch of like old school REST, and all the way down to like stored procs that we're calling on the database. So we have a lot of different data sources that we're connecting to. And so we needed really good broad support in order to do aggregation and mediation on those existing backends. And then something that we could easily hand off. And that's another reason the Swagger was more important to us, is we want to be able to hand that back to the product teams and say, okay, this is kind of what we've landed on. Now take it over and own it for the long term.
Yeah, that's great. But we also know that your company's increased its investment around Node. In fact, you even bought a small Node shop about a year ago. Does the community play at all into that factor?
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly didn't mean to downplay our usage of Node. We actually have quite a bit, and it's one of two primary dynamic languages for us. So absolutely, we're spreading it more. We've been doing stuff on the platform API team, but now we've also got, I think we're sitting at 6 or 7 product teams that are running up APIs on top of our API gateway, and then various other product teams that have been already doing Node anyway. So the community was actually the biggest thing that we looked for, especially since I had previous Node experience from like the 2011-12 timeframe. And back then, I don't know if it was the same for everybody, but it was kind of, there were a lot of packages around that were kind of half implementations. And so at the time, I got burnt several times with it's like, there's a great promise in the README, but then it doesn't deliver. And that's where now, like, we don't even have a question around that. There's a ton of great libraries that are already delivered for you and have a focus on quality, right? They really are, they're delivering production value, and you can just pick them up and snap them in.
Perfect. How about you, Bryan? What role did the community and in your own decision-making at the bank to use Node much more broadly?
Sure. So one of our core issues today is just agility and speed to market. So currently, all of our web services are shoehorned in one ear file, which I can't take credit for. So you can just figure out the issues around that, just around regression testing on its own. So currently, we can only deploy to production once a quarter, and it's just killing us. So as you can imagine, the competition for the US banking space is huge, and just being able to deploy updates to our share integration layer once a quarter is just really holding us back. So there's a need to become a lot more agile. So that's kind of why we took the direction to use Node. I mean, from a technical perspective, we've totally made a 360 change. As far as the community, using open source is new to us. So this is a new venture for us. I can give you an example. We were having an issue. One of our core backends, of course, is an IBM mainframe, and we were having issues connecting to it through a REST API. Our initial thought was, we'd just do it in Java and run it in a JBoss container and use JCA or something to connect. And it wasn't performing as what we expected, and we really wanted to use Node. So we reached out to the community, and someone pointed out the Node Java bridge. So we're using that now, and we can successfully connect to our IBM mainframe with Node, and the performance statistics has just been great. So the community has really helped.
That's terrific. Now, Joe, your experience is similar but yet different in many ways. Why don't you talk about Node at the bank and also the role of the community?
Well, the previous session that was in this room was on Capital One, and they had to overcome, as a bank, with a great deal of regulatory control and risk aversion, and we have the same issues, obviously, even perhaps to a greater degree at Bank of America. Open source comes with its own issues of liability and indemnification, need for indemnification, but what the community does is it helps add to the safety factor of using open source. We're trying to move away from vendor lock-in, trying to move away from monolithic proprietary technologies that have continued to just buy us the privilege of paying for more professional services and beta testing some big company's code. And we're trying to move to a place where we can say, hey, I want to go to this vendor, and if they don't work out, I need to go to another vendor. I need to be able to have multiple options in the marketplace, or even to be able to do the code myself. And that's where the community makes a difference. But your mileage can vary, right? We evaluated MuleSoft, we evaluated WSO2, we evaluated some Red Hat products, and some of those companies, they say they have a vibrant community, and yet they're backed by a single vendor, and they have many characteristics of a proprietary nature code base, right? So the Node community combined with the JavaScript community sets it apart, and even above the kind of the religious fervor over Java itself, right? For us to gain acceptance of JavaScript and Node, needed to be able to go head-to-head with Java itself. And the only communities that are on par with Java certainly are the combination of Node and JavaScript.
So at each of your organizations, Node has been there now for a little while, at least a year or so, maybe a little bit less than yours, Bryan. Is it growing? Is it flat? Is it shrinking? And what are some of the reasons why the use of Node across your enterprise? Joe, why don't you start that question?
Well, it kind of feeds into some future questions about, where do we get talent? But when you hold a forum, we heard in the previous session as well, they held this class and 40 people show up. We just held a lunch and learn about Node and had 200 developers throughout the bank coming and wanting to understand about home automation and Node.js and unifying the stack and how to apply it. So there's just a pent-up demand for something that's easy to learn, easy to understand, and has all of this flexibility and capability. Just kind of demonstrating the enthusiasm today, and certainly it's on an upper trajectory, but because it's a bank, it's a slow burn, right? It's a matter of years, not months, to gain adoption in my footprint.
Yeah, but don't you have also some architectural antibodies, as I call them, where maybe Node isn't yet on the approved list, or
Sure.
The production teams are reluctant to deploy it? Do you have to deal with those in your organization?
Absolutely.
And how do you work through those?
So
how do they work through those?
In the largest regulated companies, you need indemnification. You can't just take open source off the street and install it because you're opening yourself up for lawsuits. So every component we install has to have a vendor standing behind it, even though it's an open source component. So having partners in this space, whether it's StrongLoop or IBM or OpenLogic or others that we can turn to and gain indemnification and gain external support to help us in our path to implement is key. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to implement those types of technology.
And Bryan, at TD Bank, I think it's growing. In fact, you made a nice comment at lunch today about the new architecture, and why don't you share that with the team here?
Sure. And, at TD, they've put a huge investment in Node. At this point, it's our go-to technology for writing APIs. So it's really growing. One of our issues or challenges that we've run into is I have very talented Java developers on the team, and they probably haven't touched JavaScript in years. So we had a bit of a learning curve and training. So we put a significant investment, significant effort in training, starting with JavaScript and moving on to Node, and then moving on to StrongLoop and Loopback. So now we pretty much have our team up to speed, and we're writing all of our APIs are pretty much being written in Node right now. So it's really growing.
Shelby, how about at GoDaddy?
Yeah, so oddly enough, we have a language list and a framework list that we're encouraging. It's easier to change because I'm pretty connected at the top level. The guy that would be the veto is my boss, so it's just convincing him.
Yeah.
So we're maybe the sweet spot of size where it's still not that hard to change. We're putting best practices and kind of guardrails in place, but they're just that, right? If you have a competent team that wants to use something else, we happily hand out a special case scenario for that. But as far as if you're looking to build APIs on top of dynamic stuff anyway, we're strongly encouraging it. And so Node is absolutely on the rise. We've built out a reusable gateway using Loopback and various other things that you can just snap in as the foundation for your REST and have the Swagger spat out for you and be able to connect to all of our custom systems, our proprietary backends as well. So based on that, it's mainly a matter of we're going to ask you, do you have a strong preference for doing something? And anybody that doesn't, we're well, here, you can get all this for free, right? All the way from provisioning your servers up through and deployed with CD, you can get for free based on the common gateway. So why wouldn't you, type of thing. But if we have other teams where, they're happily developing in Java and they've got solid people in that, then we're fine with you continuing on that path and just giving us a Swagger for the stuff that you built in Java.
Got it. Are there any questions that you want to ask our panelists while we're going through this so far? Yes, go ahead.
I just wonder, what your experience has been in terms of how much code you have to write when you're using Node versus the language you use.
Yeah. So for the benefit of the rest of the audience, he asked what the panelists' experience has been in the amount of code you have to write using Node versus in Java or something else. Who wants to take that?
Well, interestingly, I'm still writing things in parallel. I have an Apache Camel gateway and a Node gateway and a Data Power gateway, and so I have direct comparisons, the same functionality being implemented. We, in fact, did a POC of multiple Java and JavaScript-based alternatives, And it's almost an order of magnitude difference, right? There's just a significantly reduced code set. Because we're leveraging these modules, it's more a configuration than it is coding on the JavaScript side, which is far more maintainable.
Yeah, one of the big advantages with Node is NPM. So one thing that we've done is we developed all of our connectors as modules. So our Visa connector, our Experian connector, our mainframe connector. So it's basically code once, and you can reuse it across all your APIs. It's a big advantage.
Yeah, and that's actually one reason that we kind of took. I agree that it's a dramatic difference in how little you're writing, but we took that one step further, and even the boilerplate that's generated out of loopback we got rid of and put into common configuration as well. So since we have kind of best practices around what Node is going to look like at GoDaddy, we take advantage of that, right? And we make it so that most of it is happening inside the foundational gateway. So you're focusing on what are my models, what are the relationships between those models, and using it more like if you've used Rails or any framework where you're kind of doing the ER diagram and having everything driven from that, that's what you're focused on.
Did that answer your question? Yeah. Are there other questions so far? So we talked about some of the things you've done to transition, but what are some of the biggest pain points that you actually had to overcome to get going with Node, both at the individual level, we talked about training, you mentioned that, but also at the group and at the process level, how development is done at your firms? Who wants to take that first?
I can start.
Sure.
It's a good question because we're going through it as we speak. So the old saying, we kind of put the cart before the horse a bit. So we're committed to project deadlines. So we have to get the APIs out there in production to meet, of course, all the project commitments that we've made. And so we're doing a lot of things manually currently. We don't have a mature DevOps team yet. So a lot of it, we're just creating the builds manually creating blueprints. We're also migrating to a cloud. So that's new for us as well. So there's been some challenges there. So it's not as agile as we would like it. We figured, we'll mature as we move down the road. But right now, a lot of the work we're doing is manual. And that's been a bit of a challenge for us.
Shelby, you guys have streamlined a lot of this, it seems like. What are some of the process changes you've had to put in and pain points to overcome?
Yeah, definitely I would say that less of maybe our friction has been on the Node side, but it's that also since the team is housed in the platforms group, we're evolving our platforms at the same time, right? So we're rolling out, when we started, we were rolling out a data platform at the same time, right? All of the kind of Kafka, Hadoop craziness, and even our own OpenStack cloud, right? So a bunch of the stuff that we were rolling out that's just common platforms, of course, we're the guinea pigs for, right? It's very natural since I'm in the platforms team, let's try and do the right thing as a citizen. And so I definitely wouldn't say that it was mostly to do with Node. It's mainly to do with snapping all that stuff in that's maybe they've been thinking in kind of a Windows, Java, .NET mindset, and you have to steer them a little bit towards, okay, no, we're actually Nix, and no, I can't use your regular Windows management instrumentation stuff. That's not going to play for me. So there's kind of those kind of mentality things. And then the other thing is, like, I think a lot of developers maybe think they know JavaScript, but it's not really, right? So almost all of us would have had JavaScript on our resume forever, but that doesn't mean you're ready for Node, right? And so certainly recruiters and hiring managers act like that does mean the same thing. But it really is, you have to switch your mentality, right? And so converting, I definitely had some developers that were coming from dynamic languages that had an easier time. And then a chunk of developers that were coming from Java and .NET, so statically typed languages that are more a traditional threading model, and they struggled, right? But it's, once you get kind of those fundamentals underneath them, then a lot of things kind of snap into place, and everybody starts gelling pretty quickly.
So I keep hearing training is a big part of this. Joe, how about in your case, and again, some of the other process changes, particularly to take things to deployment and to scale the teams?
We're in a similar situation where we're trying to simultaneously perfect bare metal while in parallel developing VM-based solutions. And so looking at platform as a service and containerization and deployment, I can't tell you how many different deployment frameworks and tooling I've tried and then abandoned and tried a different one. So the deployment management has been difficult. One of the bright sides, I guess, was we have a lot of very stringent standards. We want to use Interscope, let's say, for monitoring, or we want to use Splunk for logging. it was key to us that StrongLoop was able to come alongside us and extend the product line to enable those key monitoring frameworks that we needed specifically. So,
Good. How many of you are active Node developers today? And how many of you use Node for API-based uses? So about the same. Our research shows the same thing, that the predominant, at least enterprise use case for Node is around APIs. I know you all have API work in some of your cases in your titles. What are some of the other ways in which you're using Node at your company? Joe?
well, I've kind of alluded to it in my opening statements, where I'm not directly writing APIs, but I'm creating API gateway technologies, and we're creating runtime and design time, full lifecycle management of policies. And so that's really our core use case. Is, look, I want to be able to take any vendor, any technology, any format, and manage it as if it's a seamless end-to-end environment. So we've basically created, I think Intel was up here showing a similar product for IoT, where they essentially drag and drop an icon that represents a gateway, another icon that represents a device, another icon that represents a layer. We're doing the same thing. I can drag and drop a load balancer icon, a gateway icon, a service provider, a service consumer icon, and then generate policies and automate the creation of this end-to-end flow, doing routing and management and integration and logging at the same time. And so it's really accelerating the ability of anything that's been added to that framework to do DevOps for.
Go ahead, gentlemen.
We're strictly APIs. That's what we're using that for. Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, that's why I yielded. We're almost 100% API as well. We've got a couple of product teams that are full stack.
Yeah.
But by and large, we're pretty fat client is where we're drifting towards, and many are. And so we really try and focus on, it's not really anything forward.
Yep.
And also a lot of our APIs that we're developing right now are platforms. So they're very specifically trying to be client-side agnostic. But not really any like data pipeline processing or any of that kind of stuff. We're pretty hardcore API.
On that note of APIs, some of the enterprises, particularly the larger ones, you have whole pockets of teams that say, you know, and in fact, you alluded to this in your group, Shelby, that we're doing APIs just fine in Java or C#. Do you ever try to convince them to move to Node? And what's your response when they say, we don't really need Node and we're happy with our current API approach?
And so far, we avoid pushing, right? If you're making velocity, we don't want to disturb you, right? That's kind of the key to us. But we're going to make sure and kind of educate you that this is available. It's really easy. It's something that you should consider. And absolutely, if you don't have a team that's hardcore into something, then we're going to push harder. We have certain groups where we will say, especially our, like, let's say soft development groups, so some groups that we have hidden down in IT and whatnot, we will be more prescriptive, straight up. But otherwise, it's a matter of like, I'm going to make sure that you understand that it's fast to develop, it's fast to run, you're going to be woken up less, all of the things that I know is going to tempt an engineer, but in the end, it's not going to be because I told you so. It absolutely has to be because that team wants to.
Yeah. Sleep is good. Bryan.
So for us as managing a development team, it was more of an edict from architecture. So that's kind of what, and to be honest, there was some resistance from my team at the beginning. Like I said, for the most part, there were Java developers, always worked in Java, so there was some resistance. But like I said, putting the training program together, we started doing things like hackathons, internal hackathons for the developers. They got more excited about it, and now the team is very excited. I mean, the feedback that I've been getting for moving on to Node has been great, and plus the performance. You just a huge gain in performance just because of the non-blocking nature in Node and the event loop. I mean, we're getting huge gains in our performance metrics that we've seen so far.
How about you, Joe? Do you have a lot of folks that say, oh, we don't need that?
Well, I don't think I've succeeded to the extent that these two gentlemen have. I think I'm trying to introduce Node as a metadata manager to create the excitement that these two have already kind of penetrated in the API space, hoping that that leads to the adoption in the API space. But today, we're almost 98% Java-based web service or .NET-based web service, and it's going to take me still a number of more months to try to make Node take off, if you will.
Do you have any new questions for our panelists while we're running along here? Any questions you want to ask them? Yes.
Question has not really Node related specifically, but more API enterprises. So I guess maybe
Okay. So at the risk of oversimplifying the question for the benefit of the audience, this gentleman's organization just opened up your own APIs to partners and others, and how do you do, let me call it a version control, and so you want to be able to change them without breaking your partners. How do you do that? And GoDaddy certainly lives this every day. So can you talk about your experience with how you manage your APIs and versioning and so on? Is that the summary?
Yep. So we definitely have internal and external. So our products are cross-consuming just like anybody externally would, and that helps a lot. Part of it is we're a little bit lucky in that a lot of the APIs that we're exposing, it's running existing products. So we want to do a better way. We maybe want to change the abstraction level because they're too granular or something like that. But for the most part, we, maybe not one human, but as a collective, we as humans know what it needs to do. And so our first stroke, especially an external API, we do a bit more upfront, right? We try to get at least the nouns and verbs right, and then if anything, try to go a little thin on the attributes. But that way, we're not really doing full-on backwards compatibility breakages. A lot of the time, we're adding on. And that means that everybody will potentially forgive you for that. But we also do path-based versioning, right? So at any point, we're ready to do a radically different version and run both in parallel, right? And that's why that's a common concern for everybody is also, okay, I've got this new version, but that doesn't mean the old version dies, right? At best, you can potentially keep your customers to running 2 versions, but we can't even necessarily count on that when you're talking about externals.
Bryan, what have you thought ahead about versioning and so on and breakage for your APIs? How are you going to handle it?
Yep, so well, first, we're strictly internal consumers. We really haven't started branching out for external consumption as of yet. But yeah, we have worked with our architecture partners to put together a versioning plan. I mean, we're planning on supporting 3 versions of an API. Same situation so that they can run in parallel.
Did that answer your question? Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Joe, on this one? Okay. So you mentioned, a couple of you mentioned Swagger earlier. There's Rammel, there's Blueprint. Which, why? What are your thoughts around the API standards out there today?
He's looking at it like it's mine.
Go ahead,
I mean, mine's
Shelby.
pretty short story, because I'm still caught in this world where even Swagger can't render a number of my APIs yet, but certainly having many silos, trying to get some consistency and reuse across multiple divisions of the bank, we need to drive consistency first and foremost. But it's interesting, some of those are kind of different animals, right? We love Swagger because it can create a development ability to test different APIs in a live fashion. So it creates kind of a, it does some things that the other 2 standards you mentioned don't, but it's not the end of the story for me, because my APIs extend far beyond just REST.
Yeah, and so we actually started with the API standard first, right, to declare what we wanted REST to look like. And then to your point about like Swagger can't describe some of your APIs, we actually found that that's a good thing. So we evaluated the big 5 and especially the big 3, and really came down to it's as far as your format, your actual syntax of how you're going to describe your API, there's a lot of commonality, right? There's maybe a little more flexibility on one versus another, but by and large, on inputs and outputs, you can do the full contract and be just as happy on any of them. But like you say, there's the ecosystem around Swagger is more well-rounded, right? So visualization of the APIs, code genning, a spec to an API, all that kind of stuff is actually quite a bit more well-rounded. And we knew that long-term, we don't want to be doing all that stuff ourselves. We know that it's natural to want that tooling. You don't just want a design spec. You actually want to do things with that spec. And that's all the way down to, we actually use Swagger to do dynamic proxying as well. So part of the reason that we're having everybody describe their APIs with a Swagger spec is that I can then dynamically proxy that just by you handing me, here's the URL to my Swagger spec, here's the URL to my base path, and I will happily put auth on top of that, rate limiting, monitoring, metrics, you name it. I can wrap you up in a matter of 2 configuration lines, and now I'm providing you all of the kind of enterprise level services and automation that we have on all of our APIs. I can wrap that around your kind of old .NET based stuff, no problem.
Yeah, well, we chose Rammel. I think when we when we took a look, we were looking at Swagger 1.2, I think it was at the time. So we did choose Rammel. One of the reasons was we made a significant investment into a tool called Qt Assistant, which works very well with Rammel. It manages our data model. We create our API specifications with Qt Assistant. So that's one of the reasons we chose Rammel.
Have you had any challenges using Rammel with loopback?
No, we haven't.
Yeah, and obviously Swagger works really well.
It's pretty freaking good.
Yeah. Joe, anything to add to that?
No.
Shelby, you mentioned something earlier about REST flavors. Can you say a little bit more for the audience of what influence that had in your planning and decision making? And
Yeah, so I mean, everybody here will know that like REST isn't one thing, right? So it's which verbs are you going to use? Which HTTP statuses are you going to use? What casing in your paths, what casing in your properties. All of those things are decisions that you need to make just like in any language or framework. You're going to code to a coding style. Or at least you better, because it's actually going to be good for your API consumers, right? So one of the big things that we absolutely didn't want is this kind of schizophrenia that naturally develops, right? When people are building even simple things like we're all doing REST, but we're doing Python over here and Ruby over there and JavaScript over there. They naturally look quite different. And that means that even though you've got an API, it might as well be in different things as far as your consumers are concerned. And so we absolutely couldn't afford that, right? The biggest thing that we wanted to say is that like, if you look at one of our APIs, it's roughly gonna look the same when you come over here and do this other one. And if it doesn't, let us know, because we immediately wanna change that. We do not want it to act differently.
so how did you get that in from the get-go, that that's the standard and the way that the company's gonna follow whatever your verbs and responses are? Was it a spec? Was it how'd you roll that out organizationally?
So it's actually, it was two, right? Because the first one we actually call the Franken spec or the Franken standard, because we went a little crazy. And it was too tight and too loose at the same time. It was a lot of words, but it really came down to nobody would end up reading it. And so we went back to the drawing board and really narrowed it down to, there's a handful of pages that you absolutely need to tell people. And it is things like, what are for the common paths, right? Let's just show you some sample endpoints for all of the CRUD stuff that you would do, and then for what RPC looks like, stuff like that, we can give you sample paths, and immediately, intuitively, you kind of know what you're gonna do. Then lay out all of our verbs, all of our status codes, naming conventions. So we've been going a little tighter on naming conventions over time, because there's natural divergence that is just completely unnecessary. But we literally have a GitHub repo just like anything else, and it's a README in the GitHub repo. And we submit pull requests and file issues and everything else the same way you would do for regular development. And the same thing for API specs. So all of our Swagger specs, that's the way you go through the process. You submit a Swagger spec, we look at it in the Swagger UI, we do a PR, and we're commenting on it just like any other code. Because it is absolutely a first-class citizen for all of our APIs.
Joe, are there such standards also at Bank of America?
That's the beauty of standards at Bank of America. There are so many.
Which one?
Just with, that's the challenge of acquisition, obviously, is that, you buy the world's largest brokerage and then, a huge, credit card company and a large mortgage broker, and then you have to kind of reconcile decades of legacy standards together, and then, we have our rotating 8 to 10 month reorgs on top of that to make it more fun. So I think the biggest thing is a shift away from centralization toward distributed computing, right? Where before we relied on monolithic technologies and ESB technologies that added hops, added single points of failure, added bottlenecks to processes. Now we're going to an API economy, right? Where we have some standardizations around headers and structures and extensions, but still some more work to be done. I think we went to the other extreme because we were so constrictive. In the past, it was you must use IFW. No offense, IBM. You must use, SOAP. You must use very constrictive protocols and formats and registration processes. And you added months to a typical deploy process. Now we're going almost to the other extreme, allowing a little bit looser nature in the interest of enabling agility. But we're going to come back to the center, I think, at some point. So.
Now, Bryan, yours is a relatively big, recent initiative. How did you guys address the REST flavors and standardization around the APIs?
Yeah, so what we did is we have a governance team that's based in Canada that we worked directly with, and we actually took a step back before we started the development and took the time to go through every single web service that we had presently, each request response. We broke it down all the way to the field, at the field level. We mapped the fields back to our new enterprise data model. We mapped each request response to its future API, and we had it all laid out before we actually started the actual development work.
So everybody's lockstep into the same standard. I have a strong belief that APIs represent a new enterprise integration pattern, and I think that's very much in the spirit of what you're just said and what you're doing. Are you seeing that at all your organizations? This ability to have a single point of failure, more of a microservices approach. I believe that's exactly where you're headed.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing that at the other firms as well?
I'll go. Absolutely. So today we're doing a lot of complex orchestration at our web services layer. I mean, we're breaking it down. Our APIs are now much more fine-grained. And currently there's a lot of business logic in our integration layer. Really shouldn't be there. So we're kind of putting that back on the channel end. So our APIs now are much more at a fine-grained level than our services.
Anything to add to that one, Shelby?
Yeah, and that's definitely another thing that I was going to highlight is kind of getting those data structures right and getting a clean separation is part of what all this leads to. I specifically wouldn't say microservices as much, but definitely so smaller deployable components, but we don't go tiny by any means, especially since we're still working through some of the stuff to do very clean, repeatable automation recipes. So we're getting there. But I don't know, it's also a matter of we have to find the right tiny, right? Because we also have a pretty significant infrastructure and spread across multiple DCs around the world. And so some of that stuff you have to figure out exactly how well or how poorly it's going to work if you break it down into 20 components instead of 2 type of thing.
Got it. Yeah.
But we're investigating those, right? We haven't made the call on any of them. It's more that it's an active experiment, I would say.
Okay. Any questions for the panelists from the last few topics here? Yes.
One more, are there any major gaps or pain points that you see when you're using Node to migrate APIs?
So for the benefit of the audience, are there any major pain points when using Node for your APIs, and what are they, and how you're addressing them?
Debugging and profiling. No doubt. I mean, you guys all know, and by guys I mean gender non-specific folks, just to be clear. But that's absolutely a gap, and it's something that I don't know about you, but I come to every one of these conferences, and I want to go to the session on debugging and profiling, hoping that it's solved, and then it's still not, right? And this is 5 years in, and it's not fixed. And if anything, we keep doing more and more complex and sophisticated things on top of Node, and that makes it harder and harder.
Maybe the core committee has a memory leak and doesn't remember. Never mind.
Well,
Same. I mean, that's probably the #1 complaint I get back from my team is the issue with debugging. Absolutely.
yeah.
So vendors, I cannot echo that enough.
Yeah, and we know it's a big challenge. All right.
My extra use case, there's one other. I'm trying to do integration beyond just REST, so having the right adapters is also key. When I needed MQ integration, when I needed Cassandra, when I needed other types of things, they weren't available. Thankfully now they're finally becoming available, but we really need to have the same any-to-any capability within the Node framework that we have with some of these other slightly more mature frameworks. So.
Yeah. And I can, just speaking for StrongLoop IBM, that's an area of focus for us, as is debugging and monitoring Node. Yes, John. So again, for the benefit of the rest of the audience, John said he's relatively new to Node, and he wants to know how our panelists are dealing with debugging and monitoring, et cetera, in production.
Does this count as a strategy?
Oh, God.
But seriously, a chunk of it is like we've got the Strong agent snapped into all of our servers. So we're collecting system metrics constantly and watching that through our data platform. So we have near real-time dashboards that are watching everything. To some extent, we've gotten lucky. So we do have a lot of stable processes that we just don't even have to think about. Like us getting a flailing process is so rare that we don't even have to worry about it. But it's the same tools that you're used to, right? It's definitely diving down in and trying to turn on custom logging first, probably because it's pretty easy. We do have a lot of request response logging, and generally our problems are in backing services instead of in the node code. So a lot of stuff we've chased out that way. But when it comes down to, we've been very fortunate in that we don't have a true memory leak. Right, we have memory growth issues that cycle out, so we maybe have GC issues, but not a straight up memory leak we haven't run into. That's the finger crossing is only a half joke because I am waiting for that day where we run into kind of a nasty streamer pipelining problem and have to go into full-on prod debug mode. I want it solved before then. But it says something that, like, we've been in prod for, I think, about 14 months now, and it hasn't been an issue.
Well, and test-driven development as you go along as well, so.
And the other thing is that I forgot to mention that we actually have the few issues that we have had, we've been able to produce on developer laptops. So having to do prod debugging, we've avoided for that reason as well, because it's consistent enough.
I'll get to you in a second, Dave. How do you
Ours
do
is
it?
more prevention-based, right? So whether it's unit testing or whether it's an extensive set of both functional and performance testing suites, we catch it early and we don't deploy it to prod, until we know we've tested it 10 times worse than it'll face in real life. But to be honest, I spend still more of my time debugging some of my Java code or some of my other crit-sit situations on other technologies. I felt less like a beta tester in the Node world than I have in some of these enterprise technologies that have been around for many more years. But
That's a great testament to Node. And Bryan, how about you guys? What strategy do you have in place?
Testing. I mean, that's to echo the same point. I mean, thorough testing. There are some tools out there, not to give out any plugs, but we're looking at Dynatrace as well that has some of those capabilities.
Very cool. You had a comment, a question?
How are you handling governance of NPM packages, especially given 2 or 3 companies are highly regulated?
So the question was, how are they handling, let me say the term, validation of packages and so on, particularly for the more regulated companies that are up here?
Second, we have our own private NPM repository, so we don't utilize the public NPM. So we have our own in-house repository.
And do you guys do pull-throughs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's pulled and cached, but it's
Yep.
not that you're completely isolated.
That's right.
Okay.
we're limited in our module use for modules that can be supported directly by a vendor, which we would treat more as a vendor product at that point than an open source product per se. But to your point, we can't just allow to pull in a module from anywhere without, indemnification or without a direct support lifeline. So.
And oddly enough, even though we're not necessarily regulated, we're not forced to do it, we're very security focused. We cannot afford a breach. So we do the same kind of thing. We're running our own Artifactory, our own man in the middle for all of our kind of snapping components, even down to Yum, right? Your Linux packages. Everything has to be vetted and locked in, and then doing tarball deployments so that you're not doing floating deployments. Yeah.
So in the last couple minutes we have left today, let me ask each of you, what is your number one piece of advice you would have to anyone here as they're looking to do much more in Node in their companies than they are today? Joe?
Well, I think starting small, building success upon success, creating enthusiasm by leveraging existing skill sets in your UI teams and in a number of your OS and scripting teams that'll have natural affinity to the Node and JavaScript communities are all great places to start.
Shelby?
And I think expanding on that is don't try to do the religious conversion from other languages and frameworks. Find people that are susceptible, right? And just kind of pull them into hack days or whatever, or even just kind of experiment pilot projects. And you can start building that up. Because Node's very much like we spread it like an infection, right? You replace one endpoint, and then you go a little farther and a little farther until pretty soon everybody wants to use it just because it seems to be working better.
Right.
Yeah, same here. We start, there was resistance to moving to Node at first, but we started through training, through doing prototypes, and just like any typical developer, look how cool this is. And to your point, it just starts spreading like wildfire, and everyone will jump on board.
So for all of you, you are all pioneers. This is a very exciting time in our industry, and you're all part of this huge Node movement. But actually, it's early in that movement, so there's all kinds of great things ahead for you as you enlist more and more people in your company to help you out. There's also a lot of vendors. You mentioned a couple that are out there, certainly us that are here to help you as well. So make sure you take advantage of them. You don't have to go this whole thing alone. We all are eager to help this Node movement really become enterprise grade and help you all be wildly successful. Regarding IBM and StrongLoop in particular, one small appeal or ask, we're building actually a community and customer advisory board. So if any of you are interested after this session, come by and let me know, and we'd love to directly engage more and more of you as you work on these really important projects to make sure that the technologies and the solutions and services we bring to market meet your needs. So with that, please join me in thanking our panelists for giving you their very valuable experience and insights.